Evening, members.
Evening.
I can first of all just read the webcast announcement for everybody. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please also be aware that if technical issues interrupt the meeting that cannot be resolved, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Members, are you happy with that position? Agreed? And
Agreed.
Apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I've just had a phone call from Councillor Wixley. He's having difficulty with his sound, so he's logging on and off. So he would be here, but he'll be trying to join us later.
Super. That's great. Thanks, Councillor Murray. Declarations of interest. Any members with declarations of interest? Okay.
John Whitehouse and Councillor Murray.
Councillor Murray?
And just in case the item where it involves the Epping Forest CAB, the accommodation project, just in case that becomes a discussion, I'm a trustee of Epping Forest CAB, non-prejudicial interest.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Yes, on item 11, St John the Baptist Church, I live close to that development site, so I declare an interest and not participate in that item.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other members wish to make any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Reports of portfolio holders, any reports to be given? No? Okay. Public questions and request to address to Cabinet. I believe we have two public questions this evening. Neither of the questioners are present, so I will go first of all to Councillor Nigel Bedford with the first.
Thank you, Leader. This question comes from a Mr. R, I think the name is Morel, the nursery, Old House Lane, Roydon, Essex, CM19 5 Delta November. It's for Cabinet on the 3rd of December 2020. Part of the local plan, Epping Forest District Council was designed to form the plan to create the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town. The planning inspector looking at Harlow District Council's local plan was advised in the spring of 2019 that its plan was implemented in full. In excess of 1,600 or 14% more homes will be built than what was required of the council. Within weeks, the council received more planning applications from developers looking to build on brownfield sites, taking this figure to over 2,000 homes. Since the beginning of 2020, Harlow Council have continued to receive new planning applications to build homes on brownfield sites, taking a number of homes in excess of those required to over 3,000. In addition, a number of permitted developments have seen former offices converted to flats, taking this number even higher. The recent publication from the Office of National Statistics of projected new households should throw doubt on the need to build so many houses in the area. My question is, in view of the above, can you explain why Epping Forest District Council has not taken the opportunity to advise the planning inspector that it will amend its proposed local plan by removing a number of sites, particularly those to the south and southwest of Harlow, thus saving the green belt from being built on? The response. As members will be aware, the planning inspector wrote to the council following the publication of the Office of National Statistics Household Projections 2018 on the 16th of July 2020, seeking clarification as to whether the plan's housing requirement remained sound and whether a meaningful change in the housing situation had occurred. In order to respond to this, the council, together with the strategic housing market area partners, Harlow, East Herts and Uttlesford District Council, commissioned ORS to prepare some additional evidence. On the 4th of September 2020, the council wrote back to the inspector to advise that whilst the 2018 base projections demonstrate some variation from the 2014 base projections, population projections, it does not represent a meaningful change in the housing situation from one which formed the emerging local plan. The inspector has now consulted on this matter and the responses are available on the Council's website. She will be considering this information before determining whether or not any modifications to the housing requirement or the plan are required. Once agreed with the inspector, the main modifications to the emerging local plan will be subject to a 6-week statutory consultation. By way of background, the inspector considered the appropriateness of the housing numbers through the examination hearings. The plan was examined under the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework and used 2014 based projections. In her advice note of the 2nd of August 2019, brackets EB 98, close brackets, the inspector agreed that the requirements for the district should be as set out in the local plan submitted version 2017. That's the answer and response we had. If the officer that's taking the minutes tonight would like me to email that to them, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bedford. Councillor Aniket Patel, you have the second question.
Leader. I have a question from Mr. Graham Mitchell. Sorry, I have two questions from Mr. Graham Mitchell. First question, with the proposed move of Northfield Airfield and other council-owned assets from district council ownership to a wholly public-owned limited company, what are the benefits to people of the district in moving the assets from the council's direct ownership to that of a limited company? My response, there are no proposals to move Northfield Airfield to Qualis, the council's wholly owned company at this time. There is only an intention to look at the options. We would expect the benefits to be explored as part of that exercise, but until this exercise has been undertaken, this question is premature. Second question, is this committee aware, or is the council in any of its plans considering selling a stake in Qualis to private shareholders? I ask this in relation to how the proposed redevelopment of Epping Town Centre will be funded. My response, there are no proposals or plans to sell any shares in Qualis to anyone else. The council has the first option on providing the finance required to complete the regeneration of these sites. Qualis has the right to raise finance in the commercial market if the council chooses not to exercise this right. The council will choose whether to provide the finance based upon an analysis of the risk profile. Leader, as Councillor Bedford offered in his response to the previous questions, I'm happy to forward my response back to Mr. Mitchell if required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patel. Moving onwards in that case, I've got no request to address the Cabinet directly. We can move on to item 6, which is the report of overview and scrutiny. Councillor Sartin.
Thank you, Leader. The last meeting of overview and scrutiny took place on the 19th of November, and at that meeting we had with us John McGill and Anne Lim from the Innovation Corridor, who gave an overview of the work of their organisation and explained some of the reasons as well behind the decision to change its name from the previous one of the London Stansted Cambridge Consortium to the current Innovation Corridor. We actually, I think, gained quite a good insight into the way in which the organisation is going forward at the moment. Another item on the agenda was the call-in relating to the release of the restricted covenants to Epping Forest College. This was brought back to the committee. It was discussed at some length before being referred back to Cabinet, and as I know you're all aware, it's included in your agenda this evening. It was a very full meeting, a very long meeting. A couple of other items included the progress report on the accommodation programme and the Q2 budget monitoring report for 2020-2021. This is an item that would have normally have gone to one of the select committees, but because of time restrictions, it came to the full overview and scrutiny committee. And there was also agreement that on the local highways, high streets task and finish panel, which was set up at the beginning of this year, that a decision would be taken in the February meeting as to whether it should be reconvened in the light of all the impact that COVID is currently having on our high streets and other ways in which it's being looked at that moment. So that task and finish panel is still in abeyance, but will be decision taken on whether to into the calendar in the February meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sartin. Councillor Murray, I see that you want to raise an issue.
Yes, I do, Chairman. I'll keep it short because of the other issues on the agenda, but there were three things that I feel are important that I want to continue to raise. The first one was to do with the innovation corridor presentation. I thought it was excellent, and I just wanted to make sure the members had noted, because we do get 100, thousands of emails a day, that the officers had circulated the post-COVID work that the group are doing, and that is worth reading. Secondly, I will just put on record again, but I won't expound it because I've done it on a number of occasions, my very unhappiness with the continual domination of the scrutiny panels by one group in terms of chair and vice chair. There was an opportunity at the last meeting at ONS to kind of rectify that, and that opportunity wasn't taken. I didn't expect it to be taken, but I do feel strongly about it, so I will continue to put on record my strong feelings. And thirdly, the accommodation project. Again, I do want to just echo a point that I've made before, because I still feel it even more strongly than I did when I've made the point before. It's important that our staff, when they feel that they aren't able to work at home, have good access to an opportunity not to work at home, because you've got to remember, Chairman, that a lot of our staff won't be living in ideal conditions to work at home. That might be to do with family circumstances, in terms of either the elderly or the young. They're the most likely ones in terms of family. They're also likely to be living perhaps in small flats, and people in certain stages of their development, career development. I believe very strongly it's important to have the community work development side of working as part of a team. So at some stage, I would like to see the evidence of whether we are being able to meet the requests of staff to work in the offices presently or going forward. I would like to see the pressure on the pods being booked, and how many times staff aren't able to book a pod going forward, because I do think it's a real issue, and I don't think it's just a real issue for Epping Forest. If you read the business pages of the Quality Press, some of the more technical journals, it is an issue for staff morale in lots of sectors of employment, and I don't believe EFDC are any different. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you. All good points made, and it will be interesting to see as we move forward post-pandemic as to how the ways of working change and mould themselves. But I'm sure scrutiny will keep everyone to account on that. Councillor Sartin, anything further to add, or are you happy just to proceed?
Just as perhaps a follow on from Councillor Murray's last comments, there was a lot in that meeting, so I didn't cover everything in my what I've just said, but we did have an update from the People's Strategy, which included the setting up of the Employee Assistant Programme, something called PerkBox, which is aimed at giving employees online access to mental and physical well-being programmes, which I think kind of fits in with the comments just made by Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sartin. I know we've spoken about this on a number of occasions, so I'm sure we will continue to do so. Moving forward then, members, because we have got a very long agenda this evening. Item 7, a response to call in, the release of restricted covenants. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, the report before Cabinet this evening is the same report that I previously brought to Cabinet back in September. The decision of Cabinet that evening was called in by Councillor Chris Pond and other members. This call-in was debated at ONS a few weeks back. At the meeting of ONS, I agreed to ask our legal and monitoring officer one final time to approach solicitors for the college to see if they could accommodate Councillor Crispin's request regarding the open land. Their response was that the college has sold the majority of the old playing field site to Fairview New Homes, and any such discussion around keeping the site unbuilt upon will need to be dealt with Fairview during their planning negotiations. Our estates team has spoken with planning today regarding fields in trust and protection of such via a deed of dedication. The latter is a binding legal commitment with the landowner, which secures spaces in perpetuity for current and future generations to enjoy. As we are not the landowner in this case, planning have confirmed we cannot obtain such status for the land. The land stays as open space as per the local plan, which is what we know. Regarding subsequent periods post the plan period, new local plans would need to take the same approach regarding open land. This supports the view that the retention of open space is best dealt with through the planning process, particularly as EFDC has no automatic right to enforce or insist that the open land is designated a field in trust via a deed of dedication. Additionally, EFDC has no way of enforcing that the land remains as open space through a deed of release with the college. The college no longer owns the land and cannot give us that guarantee. The best avenue, therefore, is through planning, who have confirmed in this regard. Having taken into account the requests outlined in the calling and given the advice above, I have to therefore recommend that we uphold the decision taken at the September Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm obliged to John Phillip, who had a conversation with me about this following the Opium Scrutiny meeting, and also to Aniket Patel. But I just believe that we have not sufficiently safeguarded that land. And the present situation is one in which we do have some leverage, because essentially the college would have to dedicate the land as a field in trust. And my view is that we should, in order to be able to give them the transfer of the covenants that they want, they own the land, and so they could dedicate it. And we have leverage over them. I do not feel it's appropriate to leave it to the planning process 5, 10 or 15 years down the line. The people of Loughton are looking for the EFDC's protection of this land while they still can. And therefore, I think it would be dangerous simply to proceed as Councillor Patel moved in September. The planning process, the local plan is not cast iron on this matter at all. It's merely an aspiration. So unless the planning portfolio holder would like to give me a guarantee that this will be dealt with, that the land will be protected in permanence during the planning process, I think that is the wrong approach.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'll be interested too in what the planning portfolio holder has to say, but I would endorse Councillor Pond's point. I mean, thank you to Councillor Patel for the efforts he's made, but I don't think they're quite good enough yet, as Councillor Pond has outlined. And I just have to say again that the residents of Loughton, and I'm sure it's further afield than Loughton, but it's particularly in Loughton, the residents of Loughton have very little trust in this whole process, because what they've seen in that site over the last 30 years, and obviously I have a very good knowledge, A, because of the educational side, but B, the field was part of the ward I represented for nearly 20 years. So I know the issues really well. And what people of Loughton have seen is the college, and I'm not saying that individuals haven't acted in good faith, but the institution under various guises have just taken a sports hall built by public subscription, gone, taken over by the college, sold off, now a old people's residential home. The old Luckton's Field Epping Forest High School field gone under threat of massive development. And what we're getting in return isn't guaranteed, and it's very small beer. And what should upset people across the district is that there's absolutely no guarantee that the millions of pounds of new college have now raked in is going to be spent on the Epping Forest campus. It could well be spent in Hackney. It could well be spent in Havering. It could be well spent in Redbridge. So I have to say that I endorse Councillor Pond's view, and looking at it across the years, I'm very unimpressed in what has happened here. And finally, and I know that we have to accept what Essex County Council say, and I know Chris Pond is of this view, I'm not convinced that we solve the pressure on places in primary schools that is undoubtedly going to come in the Loughton area by expanding existing schools. I don't think that is the best approach at all. And this was our last opportunity to ensure a site for a school. I know Essex take a different view than that, but let's be blunt, Essex's performance over school places in recent years has not been good. I could say a lot more, but I think that's enough, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leader, can I come in at this point, please?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Councillor Patel to respond.
Thank you. We were in a far stronger position to negotiate on the covenant a couple of years back when it was first inserted. The advice that we've been given from legal is that we are now in an extremely weak position if the college was to take us to the upper tribunal, and hence why we are now in the position that we're in. I take on board the comments that have been made. We have gone back to the college as per the requests that were made. Unfortunately, we are where we are now. And as I've already said, that if we were to go to the upper tribunal, the advice that we've been given is that we would lose the case.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, would you like to make a comment as planned portfolio holder?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have sympathy for what's gone on, but I think Councillor Patel has summed it up. It basically is out of our hands. What we were in a good position a couple of years ago, and obviously because it's been passed on now, it's the third party has ownership of that land. It's their land, and they will do what they want to do. I think there possibly could be some movement if we could get some sort of agreement going forward, and I will ask officers to bear that in mind. But generally, as Councillor Patel said, it's not in our covenants, it's not in our remit to actually stop anyone doing what they want with that land now once it's been designated within the local plan. I'll wait to see what happens. I might get some more advice from Alison tomorrow. I will raise it with her, but I doubt if there's much we can actually do, as Councillor Patel has already said.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and this has had a fairly long and detailed history over this. I think Councillor Patel has done as much as can reasonably be expected, given the current situation around the release of covenants and the position of the upper tribunal. We do have a local plan that is with the inspector that covers this area. I would just point out that it's not a case of stuff happening in 10 to 15 years. We've only got until 2033 to actually complete everything that's in our local plan. So that will be coming forward significantly more quickly. And as we've seen, Fairview Homes is already pushing forward. I think we have certainly a degree of capability there to make sure that what we're getting there is what we want as a council. As I pointed out to Councillor Pond, there is a requirement to keep land open as part of that particular site in the local plan. I quite understand Councillor Bedford's inability to commit anything. To commit anything at this stage would be fettering the planning process, but we can certainly have designs on what's in the local plan about where we go, and I think that is our best route at this stage.
Super. Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. I just have Councillor Pond wanted to come back again. Councillor Pond?
That's very brief, and it'll be very brief, and thank you, Chairman. Councillor Patel said quite correctly that it wasn't within the gift of EFDC to dedicate this as a field in trust. That is correct. It would have to be the college, the landowner, that did it. But my way forward would be to make sure the college did dedicate that land as a field in trust. And indeed, they are the owners of it, because if you remember, it has been retransferred to them from Fairview Homes. But perhaps a little cheekily, I'm just going to say that I did, I think, speak to Councillor Patel soon after he took up his present portfolio in the members' room, so it's some time ago. It isn't within EFDC's gift to designate this land as a field in trust, but it is within EFDC's gift to dedicate Jesson Green as a field in trust. And since the inspector has now removed it from consideration, would he, as a quid pro quo, please consider doing that?
Councillor Patel.
Chairman, I'm not sure whether that's in my gift to be able to do that. I'm not sure who has the powers to be able to take that forward, but I'm sure all members who are listening into this webcast and participating in this webcast have heard what Councillor Pond has had to say.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Patel. I'm sure you're not going to make policy on the hoof, and none of us are this evening. This has been well debated by Overview and Scrutiny at their last meeting. We've got the recommendation before us this evening on a very long agenda. Members of the Cabinet, can I ask if you will reaffirm the decision of Cabinet from previously?
Agreed.
That's unanimously agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, purchase of street properties. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. The first in a series of reports from me this evening. The first item is on purchase of street properties, and this is something that it's our preference that we use our right to buy receipts to build new council properties. However, for numerous reasons, including COVID, there has been a slight delay, and this is proposing this evening that we agree to purchase 28 street properties and appoint Metaplan to undertake the purchase of the council. We need to use our right to buy receipts. If we don't use the right to buy receipts within 3 years, we then have to pay the money back to the government with interest. So in order to protect the HRA, ensure we are replacing council stock, this is the most financially viable step to take at this stage for the HRA and for our council house building programme. So it's a pretty straightforward report. I hope members have had the opportunity to look at it. The only slight amendment I will make is it does say a new policy on the utilisation of right to buy receipts will be presented to Cabinet in the new year. I think it probably should go to Scrutiny Committee first. So my suggestion would go to the first Community Select Committee of the new year, if that is okay. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? I've got Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is more for the avoidance of doubt, and I'll probably be seeing it a number of times as Councillor Whitbread brings forward report after report. But just to confirm that the gap between our right to buy receipts and the additional cost of the buying of the street properties will be fulfilled from the HRA and not from the general fund.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Phillip.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else from the Cabinet? No? Okay, Councillor Chris Pond.
Chris?
I think Nigel Bedford wanted to speak.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just a very, very short question, officers. Deborah Fenton might be able to answer this. Deborah, is there any, I know we want to move forward quickly and start purchasing these properties. Does that mean that we can also take advantage of the tax situation at the moment with the stamp duty being released? If we can progress those at a faster rate to get them through the system, will we actually save money?
Absolutely. So all our purchases will be completed by the 31st of March, which is the deadline at the moment, unless government decides to change it.
It would be interesting to know, Ms. Fenton, roughly how much money that saves us by purchasing them at the moment when we've got the threshold on the stamp duty has been removed. So that would be a good figure. That would be a benefit for us.
I can get that estimated quite easily and get that put in the minutes.
Thank you.
Good point made there, Councillor Bedford. Councillor Pond, sorry.
Yes, well, as one of the members for Broadway Ward, I think that the increase of the council house stock from purchase of street properties is a good idea. We are short of social housing, so I'm entirely behind that. Could the PFH please give us some ideas within which parameters these houses will be bought? Will they be family houses? Will they be flatted properties? And will there be an upper and lower limit for the market price to be paid for?
Oh, sorry, Chairman.
Solly Whitbread.
There will be a mixture of tenure of properties here, so there'll be a mixture of different sizes of properties. You'll note that it says 20 up to 28 properties, so there will be a slight variation in family homes and flats depending on need within our council stock.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor David Wixley.
Yeah, thank you. And apologies for being a little bit late. I had IT problems. Yeah, I just wondered, this is quite interesting. I just wondered how these properties are going to be selected and from what areas they're likely to come from.
Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is there'll be a selection from across Epping Forest District. Metaplan, who we're hoping to appoint this evening to undertake the duty, will go around the different properties and assess their suitability to find the best possible match to our council housing stock. So it'll be a mixture. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? No? Okay, therefore you've got the recommendations before you. Can I take those as been agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we then move on to item 9, which is a recommendation following review of service charges. Again, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. This follows on from a number of Cabinet reports recently. The two recommendations are that Cabinet are asked to approve the recommendation to increase service charges using an incremental approach. This follows a review regarding the level of service charges across the district and the requirements to introduce a fair and consistent approach to service charges for tenants living in our blocks. And the Cabinet agreed to increase in year 1 by no more than 40%, which is a maximum of £3.50 per week and 70% in 2 years. If members turn to page 29 of the report, you will see that the suggested increases are relatively modest. Obviously, in the highest leap, you'd be looking, for example, to go from 33 pence to £4.62, and that is to bring it in line with other social housing providers. The review of service charges showed that we were seriously under recovering in some areas. So this recommendation is to increase incrementally and fairly for the tenant. The staged approach is at this difficult time to ensure it is done in a fair way with best possible notice and that we have a fair and consistent approach. As I said, this will be no more than 40% in the first year, which is £3.50, in line with inflation too. Happy to take any questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the Cabinet. Councillor Bedford.
Just quickly then, Chris, I think we need these increases. I mean, looking at that charge there, 33 pence a week. I can't even buy a newspaper for that. Yeah, no, I think this is well overdue. I'm glad it's been picked up and happy to second everything.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. Does it matter that we were undercharging? Is it going to actually materially affect anything at all?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, obviously, we have to manage our HRA account in the most cost-effective way to ensure that tenants are getting the best possible value, that we're building more council houses and using our HRA wisely. This will bring a lot more money into the HRA account, which can be invested more wisely in other places, including improving our estates.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, there are 2 points really. I mean, first of all, I mean, £3.50 a week, may not sound an enormous amount, £182 a year. I mean, these things add up with other costs and things increasing as well. So I think we ought to just bear that in mind. It talks on page 29 that tenants have been consulted and they didn't have much of a view, and perhaps that's not surprising. I mean, it seems more relevant that leaseholders should be consulted. I just wondered whether that had happened at all. We used to have a leaseholders panel. I'm not sure what data on leaseholders we have now, but I mean, certainly for some cases, there's a requirement to consult with people when you're changing their charges, and perhaps you could advise us on that.
Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. The leaseholders are already paying the amount which is shown in this paper. And I would say, although I appreciate, particularly at this difficult time for many, that is a significant increase, but this is covered by housing benefit. And also it's worth noting this is in line with other social housing providers. So we are following what other social housing providers are doing across Epping Forest District and across the UK.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stephen Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points. The methodology behind this seems okay. I'm not an expert enough to know whether that's right or not, but it's only read as if it was okay to me, and that's the only way I can judge it. As Councillor Whitehouse has, I do have a real concern about a possible maximum of 350. It's not 350, sorry, £3.50 a week increase at this time. £180 is an awful lot of money to some people, and it's obviously people who are just above the benefit line that I worry the most. So, one question and one final point. How many do we know indicatively how many people are going to be faced with that large increase per week? How many tenants that large increase per week? And secondly, it's probably a problem of having too long a memory, but I don't think efficient managing of the HRA, that is a proper reason for doing this. But when it comes from a group that were quite happy to move millions across from the HRA to subsidise the general fund year after year when the law allowed them to do it, they weren't too worried about the sound finances of the HRA when they were doing that. And it happened year on year, millions of pounds taken from the HRA to subsidise the general fund. You can't do that anymore, but when you were allowed to do it, you did it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to the increase in charges, and in a second I will refer to Deborah Fenton in relation to how many will be affected by that biggest increase. But I would say actually some people are saving money through this review. So it's pointed out in the report that 228 of our tenants are actually saving money through this review. And I would say in relation to the effective management of the HRA, actually it's also this Conservative administration that have brought about a council house building programme for the first time in many years. So we are efficiently running our council house building programme and our HRA and ensuring that we're delivering affordable housing for the people of Epping Forest, which we've got a proud record of doing. And I'll hand over to Deborah Fenton to answer that technical question, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. And if it's okay, I just also wanted to point out that we are now regulated by the Social Housing Regulator, and there is a quote in the paper from the Social Housing Regulator that we should have fair and transparent charges. At the moment, as it stands, we don't have fair and transparent charges, which was another reason for undertaking this review. In terms of the number of residents who are paying the larger amount, it's approximately 25%. But as Councillor Whitbread pointed out, 200 tenants are actually going to be seeing quite a vast decrease. And I can't remember the exact figure, but there's quite a large number who are only seeing a very small increase of a couple of pence.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Chris Pond.
Chairman, not on this one. My hand was up from the last one, and it will be up for the next one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, members, everyone's had their opportunity to have their say. You've got the recommendations before you.
Chair, sorry,
Sorry,
Chair,
Rose
it's
has got a hand up.
Georgina here. Rose Brooks has got her hand up. Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Brooks, I do apologise.
Thank you.
Good to welcome you back, first of all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. It's good to be back. Just one question, really. I know at a previous, I think it was Cabinet, we did discuss about the charges as needing to do it. I just wonder if Councillor Holly could give us, Whitbread, any idea why it wasn't done before? Was it just because it was overlooked, or, you know?
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome back, Rose. Good to see you. I know that Deborah Fenton, since has taken on the role, has taken a really close look at what we're charging. Obviously, she mentioned this evening in relation to the social housing regulator and the fact that we're covered by that, and making sure that we are meeting all of our duties in relation to that and ensuring we have the fairest possible charging regime. But I know Deborah, since she's fulfilled this role, has taken a really close look at this to ensure we're getting the best possible value for tenants and ensuring our HRA is healthy and we can invest it back in social housing for local people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. Okay, members, you've got before you the recommendations this evening that will make our maintenance charges fairer. Can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Very much. Okay, so we now go on to item 10. I should have said that was service charges. This is new housing and management charges. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and another one from me. This is to approve the proposed administration fees for carrying out non-statutory requests from tenants, leaseholders and homeowners. We carry out a number of non-statutory requests from our tenants, which can be anything from replacing fobs to skip licenses. And actually, at the moment, we do this without taking in a cost. But we are able to do this, and we should be doing this for fairness and transparency. Obviously, this will bring additional capital into the HRA, which, as I've mentioned this evening, is a positive thing. So yeah, I hope members have had an opportunity. I should say, actually, these are benchmarked and fair charges, and they'll be and the money will be ring fenced for the HRA account. So I hope members have had an opportunity to read the paper and will support the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Members of the Cabinet. Councillor Sam Kane, did I see you signal? Oh, making his head now. Okay, Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think this makes a lot of sense to balance some of the costs that we incur by doing this. It's very clear from reading the report that there are significant costs in carrying out these activities. We should make sure that people who are actually getting the benefit from those activities are the ones who are paying for it. We shouldn't be putting that burden on other of our council tenants who aren't making use of these services. So I think it's reasonably equitable, and I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Chris Pond.
Chairman, I don't have any objection to what's proposed, but I'm a little intrigued by two things. Why is the permission to create front garden parking the very exact sum of £75.09? Why, for instance, isn't it £75.08 or £75.11 plus VAT? But that leads me, I personally think that should be higher, that charge. But the other point I wanted to make, and since Deborah Fenton is here, she may be able to ask, is that, of course, is creation of a parking area in the front garden and not on verges. And I wonder whether Ms. Fenton could advise us what the current policy is of tenants parking on verges in front or near their houses, particularly in the view that we've had about 0.6 of an inch of rain today and their cars are probably up to their axles.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread to start with.
Thank you. I understand that these charges have been benchmarked and assessed against other similar charges. I will ask why it is a slightly random amount, but I will pass on to Deborah to answer them questions posed to her by Councillor Pond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like 2p or not 2p.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. And I am going to have to get back to you on the specific question about the £75.09. I will have to ask my technical expert, Rachel Smith, to inform me as to how we got to that exact figure. In terms of people parking on grass verges, that of course they shouldn't be parking on grass verges. We have quite significant parking stress across the district, as you know, and as I'm sure you're aware, as part of our council house building programme, we are looking if we can ease some of those parking issues. In terms of allowing people to park in their gardens, we will also use that as an option, hence bringing in the charge. Unfortunately, we can't mitigate everybody who parks on the verge. We will take action where possible. In terms of the policy for parking, creating a parking space in your front garden, we do have a policy. It is quite specific in terms of that if it's more than 12 foot of greenery in front, then you can't actually create a space. But I think what would be more useful for members is if they actually attach the policy to the minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't really want a lot of work done on the 9p. That was merely just an inquiry. So you've got better things to do, Deb.
Thank you. That's most helpful. Councillor Whitsley.
Yeah, thank you very much. A couple of things. I think one of the problems with the parking on verges, which I don't like, but I know it's almost impossible for people not to park, was unfortunately the policy of creating extra parking spaces on council land has ceased. I think that did ease a bit of stress in the ward I represent. But really, what the question was I was going to ask is about the skip licence fee, which is £65, I see. And I just wondered what that was supposed to cover, because again, what I've seen, which I find a bit irritating, is, skip probably by necessity sometimes has to be parked on the green. And of course, if it's there for a while, it doesn't have to be there very long. It kills off the grass underneath. So do you make any efforts to recover the cost of repairing that grass? Or is it just, if we do it at all, is it assumed that that's part of the £65 which is going to be charged?
Okay, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you. And on skips, I think that's actually a good point that should be addressed. And I'm not sure if Deborah has any further comments on that, but I do take on that point, and I'm sure officers will look into that accordingly. And in relation to verges, I've seen myself on my evening walk some of the messes which has been made with parking on verges, and it is a really disappointing thing to see. And obviously, we should be working to mitigate that. I don't know if Deborah wants to come in further on the skip charges.
So in terms of the skip charges, tenants, members of the public, if they want to park a skip on our land, they have to apply for a licence, and this charge covers the issuing of the licence, because obviously there's administration time, etc., involved in that. So what it'll also do is it'll help us regulate the situation which you've just described, where people have the skip on the grass and then leave it damaged. If we're keeping a clear record of by issuing the licenses and putting a charge on, then we'll be able to follow up any damage which is caused to HRA land and take action accordingly.
Thank you. Okay, did I see Councillor Brooks asking to speak?
Yes, I'm catching up from this time.
Oh.
Question is to Ms. Fenton, because I'm sure she'll have researched it very carefully. In comparison with the other neighbouring authorities, who, for instance, the ones that are on our bidding system, for instance, are they doing similar things already, or is it in the pipeline for them?
No, they're all charging for skip hire, and there was a variation of, I think, between £65 and £95 per licence. So we opted to go with the lower rate on this occasion to not
Thanks
put
very
pressure on residents.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Murray, finally.
Thank you, Chairman. Two issues. The first one was similar to Councillor Wixley when I read the report, to do with skips. Can I take it that the conditions of the licence, probably one of the conditions of the licence that's mentioned in paragraph 10, is reinstatement of the of any damaged area? I understand the issuing of a licence and paying for it will make that management easier, but is one of the conditions that they do reinstate? I would imagine it probably is. And then I have a question that hasn't been looked at, but it came straight through to my mind on FOBs. I don't disagree with the policy, but will there be room for discretion if we're talking about a tenant that has special needs, or a tenant that has kind of dementia issues, where the loss of FOBs might, I'm not saying it happens every week, but might be more than an occasional thing. I think we need to just be sensitive about some, it would only happen a few times, but will there be some discretion about how that charge is applied? Because I'm sure that we might have some tenants who will lose FOBs because of the special needs they have.
Okay, good points. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to the skips, again, hopefully officers can look at that and make sure that condition is in place. In relation to the discretion, from the report, I cannot see that in there, but I'm sure that's something that we can look at in exceptional circumstances and we can review.
Deborah, did you want to comment on that at all, or are you happy?
Yes, I mean we're quite happy to be flexible, and there might be circumstances, for example, where a carer needs a FOB. So certainly in terms of the land, yes, it has got to be made good, and we will be following up on that very stringently in the future.
Good, thank you very much. Right, okay, can we agree those recommendations, everybody?
Agreed.
Brilliant. Okay,
Agreed.
that's superb. Then we move on to item 11, St John the Baptist Church, St John's Road, Epping, development opportunity.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report I'm really pleased to be bringing forward. It comes out of a conversation I had with Reverend Lee Batson probably about 18 months ago now. It may have even been 2 years ago, in relation to key worker housing in our district. And at the time, it was kind of a general conversation about the concept of key worker housing and its provision within our council housing list. A bit later on, Lee came to me with the possible idea of collaboration and partnership working between EFDC and the church. So really pleased to be bringing forward this exciting partnership project, which will look at key worker housing in the heart of Epping with a community hall facility as well. This evening, I'll be asking the Cabinet to approve that we go on to look at for progression of the full planning application and approve the necessary capital from the HRA. Councillor Phillip will be glad to hear me say, for this to proceed. And the Cabinet note the beginning of phase 5 of the Council House Building Programme. I know we've spoken about the Council House Building Programme in a lot of detail over the last few meetings, and moving on to phase 5, which is really exciting. And I think by the end of phase 5, we will have delivered around 500 new affordable housing units for people across Epping Forest District. And may I remind people that you have to have lived in the district for at least 7 years to be eligible for one of those properties. So that's a really positive piece of work. And on the issue of the St John's project specifically, this is a really innovative piece of work from our council, and the first time we've really done this. And I think more important and pertinent than ever, particularly in light of the recent weeks and recent months with COVID. And I'd like to thank Deborah Fenton for pushing this project forward and really driving it forward from an informal conversation to a concept. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Superb. Okay. Members. Cabinet members first. Councillor Avey. Silence.
don't think I put my hand up. I'm happy to make a comment and say how much I supported this proposal. Actually, we've seen Heart of Epping. It's been around for a long time, and it'd be rather wonderful to sort this issue out, and also St John's Road as well generally. And I think here one of the most exciting things will be the new community space in Epping, which we do need, and it delivers on all fronts, I think. So I really am supporting this.
Good. Okay, Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, not surprising. Looking at the finances, I think it makes sense to go with option C. Even so, the levels of return are tight. So we will have to, I think, be very careful to make sure we don't have any significant cost overruns on it. The concept and the approach, I think, are great. Won't say anything about the actual designs at this stage because we'll have to wait for them to come to planning. But I think the idea is a very good idea. I like the idea of looking at shared ownership. It's something I've talked about for a good while. And key worker housing in the district is something we should certainly be looking at promulgating as much as we can. And if we can get this delivered in the same time frame, and even perhaps looking something similar to the other activities we're doing in Epping, I think that will all help to make that particular part of Epping much more of a centre for people to make use of. And therefore, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think it's all good on the whole. Shared ownership does have severe problems with it, associated with it. And I would just, it's just a comment really on people in the district who have been here 7 years, who are in housing associations or council housing, who are struggling to get transferred to more appropriate areas. So let's not forget them either.
Okay. Councillor Whitbread, did you want to comment?
No comment, thank you.
I thought we'd have had more speakers on such an exciting project as this one. Again, can I echo Councillor Holly Whitbread's comments with regards to the hard work of Deborah Fenton in particular on this one, and working with the church to drive it forward. It's very innovative. It's where we should be. Key worker housing is going to be an important factor to us, especially post-pandemic. I think we're going to have to look at doing some more work around key worker housing. So I welcome this evening and support it wholeheartedly. Can we agree to recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Good. Then we go on to item 12, which is COVID-19 development projects, local business suppliers, procurement strategy and rules. Last on agenda item 93 to 154. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of two reports I'm bringing to you this evening under the Council's plan to help recovery from COVID-19. The report deals with our procurement strategy and rules. In 2018-19, we as an organisation spent around 57% with small and medium enterprises, but only 6% was with businesses based within the district. We would like to spend more within the district to promote local business and employment. A new procurement strategy has been developed to assist with local economic recovery, to make it easier for local companies to tender for council supplies and services, and to encourage local employment, including apprenticeships. It is now stipulated that 3 out of 5 suppliers invited to tender must be local. Exceptions will need to be justified. Local suppliers will be paid faster as well, 21 days instead of 30. Sustainability initiatives will be assessed as part of decisions on awards of contracts to maximise the benefits to the district. This will include evidence of sustainable practices throughout our supply chains. A social value template has been created which will measure contractors on elements such as the locality of their business, their supply chains, their workforce, and any other benefits they can bring to the district. To ensure these strategic aims are implemented throughout the organisation, a procurement checklist has been created to help officers with a step-by-step tip-off guide to ensure they are including all relevant steps throughout the process. Training will be provided throughout January and February for officers to ensure awareness across the organisation. The economic development team will facilitate engagement with local businesses through Meet the Buyer Days and similar events, which will help to inform local businesses of our processes and help them to bid more successfully for EFDC business. I'm happy to take any questions, but I would ask for your agreement to the two recommendations detailed on page 93. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Okay, I've got Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I welcome this report. I think it makes a lot of sense. With economic development, I'm already working, and we've brought somebody else in to help us identify the electronic contacts of more businesses within the district. Members will remember I talked about the gazetteer that we're producing. We have a list of businesses. We're working now to get the appropriate contacts. The challenge, of course, as with everything like that, is GDPR, making sure that we are actually properly authorised to hold that information. That will ensure that we can go out to the right people for procurement, but doing stuff like this, which encourages business within the district, has to be the right thing for us to do, and I fully support it.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting and an important read, and I also noted the sustainability criteria which have been put in there, albeit there's a lot of sort of caveats in it, but I think it is important to measure our procurement against those longer term issues as well. There are two things I wanted to ask about. First of all, this relationship of procuring from local companies and the encouragement to use framework agreements. There's a strong push towards using framework agreements in the policy, but of course lots of local suppliers don't join framework agreements, partly because it's effectively can be seen as applying twice. You apply once to join the framework and then again to actually do the tender, or if they are a member of a framework, they're not necessarily a member of the framework that Epping Forest District Council is using to procure. And I just wonder how we ensure that we get sufficient local suppliers on the list if they're not part of the frameworks. And the other is just a point of clarification. On page 123, it says in-house council services are excluded from procurement rules, which is what you'd expect. I'm not clear whether Qualis is counted in these circumstances as an in-house council service. I know there are technical rules and things, but if we just clarify that, that'd be useful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ovey.
Thank you for those questions. Perhaps I'd ask Kim Durrani, maybe he could help with the answers to those.
Mr. Durrani.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and give an answer and make sure I ask our procurement officer who's on the call, Shane McNamara. So the question around framework is interesting, Councillor Whitehouse. Obviously, some of the larger contracts, and if we look at the really big ones, BIFA, waste management, places, leisure, some of the really large spends we have, you're right. Some of the SMEs would not want to register on a framework. So I think we would use the supply chain, which has also been added, to make sure that any subcontractors that are employed are based locally. An example would be the civic offices refurbishment, which was a large project, which was competitively won by ISG, which is a large company, but their supply chain, they are employing, and we can reinforce that those companies employ local apprentices, local subcontractors, which a lot of these big companies do. In terms of the ability to go into frameworks, we do have access to a large number of frameworks. We are members of the Braintree framework, and through them we have access to a fair amount of national frameworks. The advantage, just before I let Shane come in if you want to add anything, the advantage of a framework is that a lot of the front-end procurement process has already happened. So a lot of the European procurement rule, which we're still complying with for large expenditures, is already done. So it saves a lot of time by going through framework. And yes, there is a charge for framework by us, but by us being members of the Braintree Hub, we get a rebate. So it kind of works in our favor as well. And with your permission, Chairman, if Shane can just come in case I've misrepresented anything.
Thank you very much, Kim. Shane, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, Chairman. Everything Kim said is correct. There are benefits to using frameworks. The main one is timescales. To be perfectly honest, if we're spending money at a level that we would have to follow EU procurement regulations, then a framework has already gone through those steps, and therefore we're then just running a more normal tender timescale. But as I say, there's a section in the rules that explains what we need to do if we use framework agreements, just as there is a section for what we need to do if we're not using one and we want to include local suppliers. So if we do use a framework, as Kim said, we would make sure that the social value part captures data on their supply chains and locality of those as well.
So just to clarify, the 2 local suppliers is a requirement for tenders which are not done through frameworks. So the lower general.
That's correct. If I think the rules will say something along the lines of, if a framework is being used, then those sections of the procurement rules can't apply on that occasion.
Okay, that's super. Thank you very much. Shane.
Sorry, Chairman, if I can just add, in case of frameworks, we will also do as much as we can a competitive process. We wouldn't just go to one supplier. So when we go to a framework, we would run a mini competition, and in that evaluation criteria, we intend to ask for demonstration of social value, which includes the use of local suppliers and apprentices. So depending on the advice we give and the procuring officer's view at the time, there could be higher score given to local suppliers. So that could benefit local suppliers through a framework mini competition.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
I think, sorry, Chairman, I think there's also a question about paragraph 2.11 on page 123, whether Qualis falls within that exclusion. I don't know if Kim might be able to answer that.
Yeah, we've got Sasha on the line as well, who might want to just comment on the Qualis side of things, and then we'll come back to Kim. Sasha, would you like to make a comment on Qualis?
Yeah, sure. When we initially took the legal advice on the setup of Qualis, we were advised that if Qualis is undertaking commercial activities, which is through Qualis Commercial, then it's outside of public sector procurement laws. What I would say, though, is that Qualis is absolutely committed to introducing the right procurement approach to any of its activities. And so this would seek to achieve competitive best value quotes in all instances.
Good, thank you.
But that's an interesting answer, but sorry, I meant it the other way around. If the council's procuring from Qualis, is that a competitive process, or does Qualis count as an in-house service that doesn't need to go through the procurement rules? So if we're buying from Qualis rather than if Qualis is procuring.
Okay. Sasha, is that one for you, or is that?
I think that's one for Kim and Shane, actually, because it's the other way around. I don't know if maybe Shane can answer that.
Shane or Kim?
So my view would be, just as Sasha said, we would be looking for best value for Epping Forest District, and Qualis being a subsidiary but an independent company, we would like to see the competitive advantage with going with Qualis. So we wouldn't just automatically give them work, as I guess we would give to our grounds maintenance team, because that's in-house.
Yeah, okay, point taken. Right, okay, let's move on to the next question. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Leader. I completely support this item. It's completely the right thing that for us to be doing at this present time. Supporting local business and local suppliers is the right thing to be doing. The question I have, though, is around the social values. Wondering what provisions or what considerations were made to some of the initiatives that the council have been taking forward from a health perspective, in terms of trying to encourage businesses to become, for example, dementia friendly, and in terms of training frontline staff, for example, around residents who may be socially isolated, raising awareness in those areas. Have we given any focus to asking suppliers to participate in any of these schemes? Not schemes, but community-based initiatives.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Patel. Again, I'll look to Kim and Shane if they have any response to that.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Portfolio. I think that's probably a little bit more detailed, Councillor Patel, because that would be down to the specifications for individual contracts. So if we had a contract where we felt that it's, for example, services to residents or where there's interaction with our customers, then those are the kinds of things which the contracting officers with advice from the procurement team will want to consider. So when we set the scoring matrix for any contract, depending on what we are procuring, we would set the criteria. And if we had a contract or a supply and service situation where we felt the kind of things that you've mentioned need to be scored highly as part of appointment of a contractor, we would then give higher weightage to that. So it's gonna, I'll let Shane comment if we've added something like that, but the focus is yes, health and well-being. So it would be the detail that we set when we set an evaluation criteria for contracts. Shane, do you remember if there's anything in there or that's how we would deal with it?
Thank you, Kim. No, you're quite right. I don't believe there's anything specific around what Councillor Patel has just mentioned. We do have, as I say, some standard questions that we will have, and then the rest will be sort of on a case-by-case basis, as you said, depending on the requirement and the nature of the services that we're going out to procure.
Yeah. Okay. Moving onwards then. Councillor Heath.
Chairman, can I come back, please?
Yeah, you can come back, but just once. Councillor Patel.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Girani and Mr. McNamara. So what assurances can you give though that the evaluation criteria, when putting together the evaluation criteria, that this will be included as a key frontline focus?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chairman. I think this is where the report mentions about training of contracting officers. So the focus that the procurement team would have would be to impress on procuring and contracting officers across the organization to increase their awareness of social value. And every contracting officer will know best about their service area. And we would try and highlight what we mean. And they're the subject experts and they would know how they can include. So any of the services, for example, our community safety team or our community partnership team, or even the housing team, if they've got elements like that, they would be the ones who would be aware of that. We would help them develop that criteria. So if I can briefly give an example, when we procure contracts, we could go for a ratio of price versus quality. So we might say 70% for price, which is out of our hands, then the cheapest one gets the highest mark, and the 30% and then split into whichever way we want to develop the criteria. And we would be advising the contracting officers. And in an example that you've given, Councillor Patel, if the service manager felt that they need to add more towards those types of things, that 30% would be expanded. And that's when they would be asking for evidence. So I can guarantee that we will offer that training to staff and impress on them what we can do, and sustainability and all of that runs across the team, across the organization. And we will be doing that, as the report says, in January, February, as soon as members have agreed the new strategy.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Heath.
Well, thank you. Some very, very good points made already. The framework, yes, everybody should. If you're a local business, you should try and join that thing, because that's the way you're going to get work. A few particular questions. 21 days paying, Councillor Avey pointed out. Is that from invoice, or is that from the end of the month that is invoiced? So is that effectively 51 days, or is that actual 21 days from invoice received to payment? Because that's very important for cash flow. It's very, very hard to assess a social value of something. So maybe a benefit multiplier might be the way to go forward. So £1 spent locally is going to generate X, 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 X next, and that can be figured out quite easily and simply. But the other point to think about is that if there's a small supplier locally who is supplying whatever service, it doesn't really matter. Does the money stay local? Because, you know, I'm glad to see that everybody's adopting a Green Party policy of trying to spend locally. That's a very good thing indeed, because 75% stays local. But does the money actually stay local? And then is there any kind of guarding to stop a supplier becoming the supplier and therefore becoming too big and pushing out others. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Heap. Of course, the Green Party is following everybody else because we've all been talking about shopping local for years, and small shop local Saturdays coming up this weekend, and I'm hoping as many people will be using our high streets as possible, safely, of course, properly socially distanced, with masks on and hand sanitisers available to make sure they keep our local businesses afloat. Councillor Avey, what's your answer? Councillor Avey?
Yeah, no, sorry. I keep on getting muted. Does the money stay local? Well, this is the intention of this policy, obviously, and that's what we want to achieve. The other points, the 21 days, if I could refer to perhaps Kim or Shane to respond to that, and maybe the benefit multiplier.
Chairman, I think 21 is from the day the invoice is registered, so I just look to Shane to nod or otherwise.
Yes, it would be 21 days from I think the wording is from the receipt of an undisputed invoice.
Okay, thank you. And Chairman, the point about the social, the benefits multiplier, we'll take that back and see how we can address that if we can.
Right.
Sorry, could I just come back on one thing?
Very quickly.
The date that the invoice is received, if it's undisputed, could there be some kind of mechanism whereby it's acknowledged that it was received on the day that it was sent? If it's an electronic thing, because they're probably going to be electronic in the future, so send it on the 1st of the month, you expect to be paid 21 days later.
Can we let officers come back on that one? I'm sure that will be the answers tonight. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Members, you've got a really good set of recommendations there, a really good project to be pushing on with. Procurement is really key. The more you involve local companies, the better, and having social value added to it is the right way forward. Can we agree the recommendation?
Agree indeed.
Superb. Item 13, COVID-19 development projects, travel local demand responsive transport. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chair. This is my second report on the Council's plan to help recovery from COVID-19. As you will be aware, the Council's been subsidising bus route 87. I see Councillor Pond is probably sitting up now as I mention that phrase, by part sharing costs with Essex County Council. This bus service services areas of Loughton, Thane Boys, Epping and Harlow. The subsidy was part of our effort to avoid termination of this route as ECC operators made it work commercially were unable to do so. So far this year, we have contributed £75,000. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has meant that passenger numbers have declined even further, and it is difficult to foresee this route becoming commercially, financially viable. Thankfully, despite the gloomy picture, we have an opportunity to test a hybrid demand responsive transport, or DRT, service on this route from the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2021, next year. A DRT is a bookable transport service. Some refer to this as a council Uber. I'm pleased to say that we've been able to identify Epping Forest Community Transport as a suitable partner. EFCT ran a DRT service for NHS staff at Princess Alexandra Hospital and St Margaret Hospital Epping during the earlier peak in COVID-19. EFCT have been running a closed user group commuter service for another small business as well. The proposal I have before members is to consider funding for a hybrid DRT service along the current bus route 87. This will be in the form of fully DRT service at peak times, enabling NHS staff and others to book journeys. Outside of this, it will run just as the current scheduled bus route 87, enabling off-peak users to make journeys. The funding I'm seeking will enable the trial and represent the total cost of operating the service. I'm confident the actual cost will be lower as we intend to charge the same bus fare as the current bus 87. I'm hopeful that NHS staff will benefit from the service, as well as other employees, including our own staff. This will reduce the number of single occupied car journeys, reduce congestion on our roads. free up much needed car parking spaces, and also help us in tackling the challenge around air quality in the district. I'm happy to take any questions, but I ask for your agreement to the 3 recommendations detailed on page 155 of the bundle in front of you. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Let's start with Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report. The 87 bus is clearly an important mode of transport for Theydon Boyce. We already are seeing the displays of the 87 route being withdrawn, and that is causing some concern. I think this is the right way to go forward. I look forward to a successful trial and then potentially expanding it to meet some of the other areas that are not so well connected as they are at the moment. I know certainly from our Theydon Boyce Parish Council that there is a shopper service that comes through from Abridge through Theydon and up to Epping. It would be great if we could look at potentially including that as well, because I know that might give the DRT route some extra footfall and therefore make it more commercially viable.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got my virtual hand up before because you ignored me when I was waving on the last item. Just to say, I think this is a really fantastic idea, actually, and should really benefit local people. My question to Councillor Avey is in relation to advertisement and what is being done to make sure this is communicated in the best way to ensure best possible and maximum usage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holly Whitbread, for that question. Can I ask Kim Durrani if he's aware of what advertising we're going to be doing on this? And obviously there will be advertising.
Thank you through you, Chairman. We are aware, and we were hoping that if Cabinet made the decision to support what the portfolio holders put before you, we would start aggressively marketing and put up notices on the bus shelters where Councillor Phillip mentioned messages always going out from county. We're working closely with county colleagues, and we have got a PR campaign in hand. So we will, as soon as Cabinet actions and agrees, then I think we will start issuing media releases. If, with your permission, Chairman, I'd just like to introduce Stephen Lloyd-Jones, who's on the call, who's our Sustainable Transport Officer. If Stephen can wave, so members can see. He joined us a couple of months back, and he's been leading on this project. So I don't know if Stephen wants to add the plan on marketing and comms very briefly. Stephen?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. Good evening, Chairman and members. One key thing is to get the NHS to publicise this to their staff, and as has already been mentioned, the FDC staff as well. And we are looking at a targeted Facebook and social media type campaign in the relevant geographies. And we're going to have a landing page for people to express interest following the PR and these other activities. So yeah, I think that's in hand. There isn't much time, but social media can do its thing as well as getting the NHS to help.
Brilliant. That's great, Stephen. Thank you very much. Councillor Aniket Patel.
Thank you, Leader. Just want to touch on a point that actually Councillor Phillip has made regarding potentially expanding the service once it's been embedded. I would certainly like to see that all towns. Look, I'd like to go one step further and try and support all of our town centre areas and have a bus link that connects all of them together, so that our residents can get out and get to each of the different high street areas within the district. But again, I welcome this report. I think it's completely the right thing for us to be doing. Thank you.
Superb. Thanks very much. Councillor Avey, did you want to comment on that?
No, absolutely. I think it's exciting, and it may well be the way forward to the kind of sustainable transport that we're all looking to achieve. And certainly, I think after this trial, we can cautiously think about rolling it out perhaps onto other routes. But let's see how we go with the trial.
Great, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Sam Kane.
Thank you very much, Leader. As members know, there's a bit of a hobby horse of mine. Yes, we really want to see this succeed. So my question relates to this trial. How are we actually measuring success? what actually constitutes success for this trial, and when do we start assessing that success and future plans for that route?
Thank you. Councillor Avey.
Thank you for that, Sam. Yes, you're quite right. How do you assess how successful a service has been? It certainly, as portfolio holder, will be something I'll be keen to know, and perhaps I can hand that over to maybe Kim or Stephen Lloyd-Jones to perhaps respond to that point.
Okay. Kim?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll let Stephen come in. We will be monitoring it from day one. I think the intention is before the end of Q4 in March, which is January, February, we have something before Cabinet which demonstrates success. The Chief Exec, Georgina, has written to NHS and PCT Chief Execs to get traction and get over GDPR issues so that we can contact NHS staff. The members might be aware there's a major problem in both the hospitals mentioned in the report around parking, especially Princess Alexandra and Harlow, where some of the frontline staff are really struggling because the space simply isn't there, and they're ending up with penalty charge notices. So we believe that's a captive kind of catchment audience. The report mentions our own staff, so there's about 60 odd EFDC staff, and we're hoping they'll use it. And we are confident. It's not mentioned in the report, but Epping Forest Community Transport are also working on the Chigwell bus service for children, for school service, and that's an app-based service, and we're looking to expand that because it's the same software. So some of the funding in the report will allow us to convert that into a more digitally enhanced offering where websites and apps and phones will be enabling people to book. And if Stephen wants to come in, the hybrid intention is members to have morning and afternoon peak time for commuters and not the daily users, which people using the central line or coming the other way could use that. So I get exactly what members are saying. The report does caveat COVID-19 because until people are comfortable, to start with, the service has to be COVID compliant, which means in the minibus, which can seat quite a few people, they can only accommodate 7. So that is already a restriction we will have to put up with, which means we can't have full occupancy. So there is a bit of a restriction, but we are hoping that our marketing and the need which is there will help us. Stephen, you want to say anything on some of the stuff kind of in the last couple of days that's happened?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Chairman, thank you. I think obviously we'll have fairly live revenue sort of input. We'll get numbers, hard numbers on registrations of interest. There will be an introductory offer. In fact, throughout this trial, normally with Epping Forest Community Transport, one would pay £15 a year membership fee. That's part of the way community transport operates, but we're using that to make an incentive to users. And we'll try and follow up with them post-event, post-usage, just so we can find out how the service was for them, their likelihood of continuing it in a perhaps a more high-tech guise, as Kim has said. So I think we've got a suite of measures ready to go.
Right. Thanks, Stephen. That's great. Okay, who have I got next? Councillor Chris Pond.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think this is a very good trial initiative. One of the difficulties will be intermeshing the timetabled off-peak service with the book on demand service, the DRT service at peak times. Of course, quite a lot of the clientele of the peak times are in fact school children, and in the afternoon peak, that they may well interface with the timetabled service. So I think it is something which has got to be played by ear once we've got some experience under our belt. I do think there is some room for confusion as to how the two services will intermesh, and particularly in the case of old people as to when their OAP ENCTS passes will be available. Of course, that has got to be done because if you don't make it Section 22 service, then not many people are going to use it because the old folk won't be able to use it as they normally do a bus. Couple of things, minor points. The question about publicity has already been dealt with, and I'm glad to see there's going to be a publicity blitz. I think that's very good. And the last point I want to, 2 points I want to make. First of all, will those running the service make sure that it serves the Newham Council campsite at Debden Green. The trouble with the old 87 is that drivers would sometimes refuse to stop at Debden Green. And I'm presuming, therefore, that the DRT service will be Hale and Rye. And indeed, I hope the timetable service will also be Hale and Rye. The last point I think I wanted to make is about Langston Road Retail Park, in that the one virtue of the Route 87, which Leader and I and Kim and others have talked about on many occasions, is that at least it does provide some public transport into the retail park. And when I asked about this a few weeks ago, I was told that that would be another timetabled service. So perhaps the PFH can enlighten me on that, because I think for Epping Forest to lock down a retail park 8 minutes walk from a railway station for an old lady with shopping is really, or an old man for that matter, is really unsustainable. And for EFDC's green credentials, that needs to be sorted out very quickly. But on the whole, I think this is a very good initiative. I wish it well, and let's see how it goes.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Avey, anything to add to that?
Well, I think I'll just offer over to Kim and Stephen to perhaps respond to those points, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pond. I'm just looking at a message which Stephen sent me earlier this evening, and I'll just read that out. The county's 542 Loughton Town service, which is the service that's replacing what will be the old DRT, will not serve the retail park. So I think Stephen's message to me is, if that is the case, then it gives our proposed DRT service a very good chance of picking up those customers which wish to go to the shopping park, which helps the customers, but it also helps our business case, because it means more business. So I'm quite confident we can make that happen.
I'm sure that's correct, Chairman. I'm sure that's correct. But of course, the main demand for the retail park is in off-peak times, when the timetable service will run. And I think that's a conundrum Mr. Lloyd-Jones will have to play with, because the two don't seem to be particularly reconcilable. Also, the lack of a bus stop at the Langston Road Retail Park is a severe disincentive to someone with a lot of shopping, and the lack of a shelter as well.
All good points. Thank you. Right, Councillor Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, most of the points have been made. I think it's all good for the most part. I'd like to echo what Councillor Patel said. I think that's a very good idea to have a bus service linking all of the shopping centres. So all good.
Brilliant. That's good news. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a good service too. I'm looking forward to seeing it running. Could somebody just confirm what's the capacity of the buses? I thought I heard someone say 7. Was that correct?
That is in the COVID world.
Right. I mean, how often is the bus running then? Because all this advertising, encouraging the people in the hospital and the staff and everyone to come on it, doesn't seem to mean there's going to be enough room. But how often is the bus running if it's sort of responsive?
Councillor Avey, I know you're going to be a regular user.
Absolutely. I'll hand over to Kim and Simon to answer that.
Yeah, so I believe the schedule is an hourly service, and it would at least run on that. But being a demand responsive, one of the benefit is it wouldn't just run if no one's using it. So for the demand responsive element of it, if it's not booked in advance, or if we're hoping the app would allow people to say where the bus is, so it can be booked. So if there is no booking, it won't run. So I think, but for the scheduled part, which is the current DRT, it will run as an hourly service. Stephen, do you want to add something on the capacity and the restriction on 7?
Yes, thank you, Kim. Thanks, Chairman. I think the other point, the reverse of what Kim just said about DRT, is that if demand is more, so let's say there are a lot of NHS staff wanting to get somewhere for 7 a.m, then a second vehicle can and will be put on. So we'll need to work through the detail and see what the registration information comes up with, where we'll be asking people, where are you likely to travel and at what times? And then Epping Forest Community Transport have got some flexibility, as I say, to put on a second vehicle for excess peak DRT demand which is part of the definition of that kind of service.
Does that mean you have to keep 2 drivers working? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, I think Councillor Bedford has his hand up.
Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman, been very patient. I'd just like to point out on page 155, a typo error. You've got 3 paragraphs listed, but it goes 1, 2, 2. That's the first thing, it's just a minor thing. But the second thing to bear in mind, and perhaps Mr. Girani might be able to do some work on this, is don't forget that the new COVID vaccine is being launched early December. And if we're actually taking forward a project to run the DRT, the hospital staff are going to be the first staff to actually get the vaccine. So possibly working with the hospital as soon as possible and notifying them about transport, we can actually increase the capacity on the bus. We could still have COVID measures in place, but because they've had the vaccine, we could increase the capacity of the buses.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to see things change very rapidly now, aren't we? As we see vaccines come into play, track and trace increasing in its usage, better testing. Things will get better as we get into the spring and beyond. So brighter days are ahead of us, Councillor Bedford, as you say.
There's just a song about that. It can only get better.
Well, nothing could be much worse than 2020, could it? Okay. Councillor Wixley.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I thought the point that Councillor Bedford made is quite interesting about the staff having the vaccine. In view of the fact that there are 2 buses, would it be a good idea to reserve one for hospital staff, which could be filled to capacity, and the other one which can't be filled for capacity for other users?
Thank you for that suggestion. I don't know, Stephen or Kim, you have any response to that?
Stephen looks like he's willing to come in on that one.
Oh, thanks, Chairman. I was actually writing that down as a series of very good points. I think, as you've said, things are going to move rapidly here, and it could well be that there is some system, let's say, where the QR code can prove you've had the vaccine. Who knows? That, maybe that can be embedded in the technology to load the bus. But I certainly take on board the point about an NHS Express shuttle.
Good. Superb. Members, you really all had a good opportunity to ask questions. Can I just remind members again to use the blue hands when they're wanting to speak? I've had a couple of Cabinet members who have missed out this evening, but if you don't use the blue hands, I can't spot you all the time. Can we agree to recommendations?
100%.
Okay, superb. Wonderful. Okay, then we go on to item 14, asbestos policy. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my last report of the evening. I'm sure everyone will be pleased to hear. This is in relation to the Council's asbestos policy 2020. Following consultation, we are looking for the asbestos policy to be approved. This is to minimise risk for our council tenants and is in compliance with the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012 Act, so in compliance with the law. I'm sure members have had the opportunity to read the full report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, members, have you all had the opportunity to read the report? I've got no one wishing to speak. Any Cabinet members? Okay, can I agree to recommendations?
Agreed.
Great, thank you very much. We then go on to agenda item 15, which is the Civic Accommodation and Community Hub, which is under my banner. Obviously, I'm pleased to see this come forward. I think it starts to clarify some of what we expect from a community hub, and I will shortly call upon Louise Wade just to go through some of what's planned and what we're working on. I think members will agree with me that since we've agreed to do this, the world has changed completely. We now, I think more than ever before, see the benefits of partnership working across the board, and I'm not just talking about with other councils, but with other partners, including the CCGs, and so health, police, and all the other partners that we've dealt with over the years. Voluntary Action Epping Forest are more important now than ever before. So we really do have a good opportunity with the civic offices in their refurbished state and I'm pleased to say they're coming on very quickly. I know members had a presentation a short time ago to actually make a good use of this space. I was very impressed by the ground floor areas that I've seen, and the fact that we're going to have the ability to have small conferences there as well. But I think Louise can go through the detail, just a bit of the detail of the report, and then we'll just have a general debate around it. Louise, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. Today, the conversations around the use of the Civic have been focused on the utilisation of the building. However, we have an opportunity now to look at this in a truly different way. A community hub, if we set it up in the right way, can benefit our community, not just in terms of a place to meet or participate in activities, but one where we can work together with partners and businesses to come together and establish a shared strategic direction with integrated services and pathways that really benefit our residents. This is a fantastic opportunity to work together with our partners, developing a vision and one that we can achieve together. The services provided within a community hub can be diverse, and along with partners, the community have an opportunity to really develop and be involved in that. There is an element of the building that can also be used to earn money and to also be put back into running of the hub and the benefits of the community itself. What we'd like to do is extend this vision beyond the Civic and look at how we can establish a community hub vision across the district, understanding how we could extend the model through Loughton Broadway, the Lime Centre and Waltham Abbey, ensuring that all residents can really access these services in a consistent way, but across many locations. Working together with our partners in understanding what our community needs are is where it really starts. And the first step towards that is the co-location. And I'd just like to quickly hand over to Jen Gould just to provide an overview of the current partnership discussions that are taking place with VAEF and EFCA and the discussions that she's had to date in really looking at the benefits that the co-location can bring and the future of our integrated service model that we'd like to develop through the community hub.
Much appreciated, Louise. Jen.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've been having some conversations with VAEF about coming in and co-locating in the Civic, and we've been talking about our partnership work as well with Citizens Advice and a number of other partners. So, for example, Chess, who's our commissioned rough sleeper service as well. We've been talking very much about a community hub model of service delivery, and that starts with a bit of co-location, but really what that means is that we can come together as equal partners and work as sort of task around families. So we will be targeting services where they're needed and be able to get some added value out of all of the different services that we each provide, so that residents are getting that real sort of holistic service provision across the piece. We're looking really at having sort of themed days in the hub. So, for example, we've also been speaking with DWP and talking about getting some of their specialist roles in around job coaching. So we will link that with our single homeless work and our rough sleep prevention work, for example. So we'll get Chess in at the same time so that we can link the housing and employment agenda. And equally, when we're working with family solutions in temporary accommodation to prevent and relieve homelessness, we'll look at making sure that we get all of those people on board so that actually it's not just about providing one service and leaving people to then go off and find the other support that they need. It's about us being able to link them up with that support right from the very outset. And I think working in a hub type environment will enable that very early intervention right from the outset. And actually, what I should also probably say is that the Civic really will be the sort of heart of the hub approach. So as Louise mentioned, we'll be looking to provide that sort of community hub approach in different locations. So it is about having that heart of it and the hub of it in Epping, but actually that will expand out to different areas across the district. And we'll target where we need different services in those areas. So we'll look to see what the footfall is in places like Waltham Abbey, for example, the needs at the Limes, and we'll make sure that we can spread the services accordingly.
Great, thank you very much. Both of you, thanks for that presentation. I think it highlights to members the opportunity that we've got before us to actually reach out further into our communities by making these changes. I've got a series of questions. Cabinet members first. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. Not so much as a question, but just a few statements from me. I think this is a really exciting project, and earlier in the summer I had the the opportunity to look around the space. I know it's come on a lot since then, but I was really impressed by how opened up and modern it was seeming at that point. And what I would say is I think this is a really positive thing for the community, because the Civic in Epping will become much more accessible to the public, and there'll be much more services which are accessible to people. And I think it's good that a civic building is actually an open space which members of the public can use. I think that's really vital. I really like the idea of the hub approach across our services. I think the satellite hubs is a particularly important concept. And I know that's something that we've been doing virtually too, with Rob Pavey's team bringing kind of a community hub approach online, with referring people to relevant services, whether that be DWP or the food bank or whatever relevant services people require. So I think that way that we think, and that holistic way of thinking, is really vital to the way we look at how we deliver services moving forward. But nothing too much to say, just that I really welcome this piece of work, and I look forward to seeing it open in the new year.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. When I read this report, I was really pleased. It's beginning to read far more like a community hub that I and others had in mind. So well done in the officers and yourself in progressing that. I will just say one thing, and it's not a problem that we can do much about. I do accept that Epping is geographically the heart of the district, but I think in terms of location where the bulk of our population live, it clearly isn't. And it's always dangerous to make remarks like this, but I have to say from my experience, the majority, a significant minority will, but I would say the majority of people I certainly know in Buckhurst Hill and Loughton don't think of Epping. I mean, they rarely use it, actually. I would say they very rarely travel to Epping because they don't need to. They don't work in that direction. Their social life isn't in that direction. With, the proximity to London and so on. So I think we do have to realise that for a substantial number of our population, Epping isn't a loci at all. I'm sorry to say that to Epping councillors, because I realise we are Epping Forest District Council, and my guess is that that's probably true for Waltham Abbey. But I'm sticking my neck out talking about Loughton, so I don't really want to talk about Waltham Abbey. But I'm just thinking in terms of transport links and the location and the links that Waltham Abbey has in the opposite direction. Unless you work towards Chelmsford, which the bulk of people in Loughton don't, Epping isn't a loci that or a place that they know very much about or ever visit, to be frank. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't go ahead with this scheme. But that's why I was particularly pleased about the satellite concept. And I think the Broadway office in particular is looking very shabby. And I might stand to be corrected, but the Broadway office is the only one or one of two physical bits that EFDC has in our largest town, Loughton. Doesn't have any halls. I'm trying to think of any other locations. I think the Broadway office is more or less it. And it's looking very shabby. And I know Deborah, if she's still in on this call, I think her items have gone. The rejuvenation of that office is long overdue. And if it can become part of the satellite concept of the hub as well, that will be good. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. The officer team are all still present this evening, and I'm sure they'll pick up on your points about Debden Broadway. I think you're making an interesting point. Epping Forest District has always been interesting from its makeup. You're quite right. Obviously, a lot of the population is in the south. There's an important piece of work to be done in Waltham Abbey, and it's important for them to be connected. Some of the areas of social deprivation in the district are in Waltham Abbey, but we mustn't forget the likes of Ongar and the rural areas as well. So it's a really amazing district, and we're lucky to live here, aren't we? And of course, it's finding that balance. Of course, what I have to deal with is the fact that district council offices are in Epping. And I think by taking the actions we've taken, we'll actually make them more usable and more open to people, which is what's important. And I think we'll be able to expand our outreach to other parts of the district as well. And that's our ambition as time goes on. And I think that's what's enshrined here this evening. So let's hope we can continue to build upon your pleasure with the report this evening and address some of the issues around it. But it's never an easy journey on these things, and I know there's always controversy as you're doing them. Councillor Aniket Patel.
Thank you, Leader. Again, I welcome this report as well. I think a significant amount of work has taken place here, and Mrs. Wade and Mrs. Gould should be congratulated for their efforts in making this into a proper community hub. Essentially, I mean, what we're doing is setting the model of what a community hub should look like, and it's perhaps something that Essex County Council should consider in their approach to the libraries, for example, and seeing how, where possible, those library buildings can be utilised to provide similar type of facility, and where not, library spaces, libraries being moved into community hubs within the different town centre areas, so that we can continue that service within the different towns and parishes. But just fantastic work.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Good points, Councillor Patel, because in the months and years ahead, as we recover from COVID and we move from the pandemic, and it picks up on something Councillor Murray said earlier on about the need for people to be able to have, some people like to be in a physical workspace. And I see as the years go on now that we'll have much more flexibility, and it won't be unusual for someone from the county council to be able to come into a district council office to sit down to work, as well as someone from a district council office being able to go into a county library to work. I think we're going to have much more flexibility around the public estate, remembering it's the public that own the estate. But I think we are going to have to learn to work very, very differently in years ahead. And I think your point raises that. And also Councillor Murray's point from earlier on this evening, a good point. Some people like to have an office to work from, other people are more comfy working from home. Just, we're going to have to reshape ourselves an awful lot post-COVID. Okay, moving on. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. When the community hub was first talked about, I had the impression that organisations would be giving up their existing accommodation and moving into the council offices. I think now, am I right in thinking the community hub is more like an information desk, that each of these organisations like BAF, CA and so on will have an information desk in the council offices, either in the foyer or somewhere, and this is what we're talking about when we talk about a hub?
I think the hub may take a variety of different shapes and forms, and some will decide to actually move into the hub. Others may decide to have a presence in the hub. I think different people will take different routes, but I think Jen might like to add something to that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than just an information desk. So organisations such as VAEF, for example, will be coming into the hub, and that's where they're going to work. They've given up their premises. That's not to say that all of them will, but I think it does a number of things. One is it allows people or organisations to see customers in that space, and it allows us as officers, when we're seeing customers, to get somebody else involved in that customer right from the outset. So, for example, if a homelessness officer is seeing a client, they can get a CAB advisor in to talk about money advice straight off the bat, for example. But what it also does is allow officers behind the scenes to talk about clients that they have in common and put a really sort of robust and comprehensive plan around those individual clients. So I just think from that point of view, in terms of the communication, it will become a lot easier and a lot more robust to benefit clients in the whole, really. So Councillor Whitbread, it's absolutely right. It will be a number of different things to a number of different organisations, depending on who they are and what they do and what contribution they have. So I don't necessarily think it will be organisations all adhering to the same kind of blueprint. It will, I think, largely it will grow to an extent organically around how we all work together and how that plays out a little bit. And certainly, we've seen some examples, even across Essex, of really successful hubs in that way. So I'm really confident, for example, that, the the benefit of having chess, for example, on board around rough sleeping will absolutely mean that we can respond to rough sleepers a lot more quickly, and the sharing of information will get a lot easier as a result.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bedford, are you waiting to come in?
No, sir.
Okay, sorry, that was from a previous hand in that case. Councillor Crispon.
Well, I think it's obviously a good thing to make better use of the civic offices and the creation of community enterprises within it are, I think, an excellent idea, because after all, the civic offices were a misplaced vanity project of 30 years ago, and they are only now being given over to the public who own them. So I think that's an excellent thing. I hope the Epping Branch Library will be able to be accommodated in the civic offices, and in particular, I hope a reasonable amount of space will be given to it, because you need a good library in a medium-sized town like Epping, and it's obviously sensible to have it somewhere accessible near the high road, and it itself can become a community hub, as many of the libraries in the district have. Talking of libraries, there is a certain amount of anguish in Loughton about the likely takeover of the statutory library function of Debden Library by the college. The library there is simply in the wrong place. And taking up points made by Councillors Patel and Murray, the Broadway is the place that the people of Debden want their library. And next door to the rather run-down EFDC housing office is a premises which I believe, so rumour tells me, is going to become an amusement arcade. I would have thought it would be much better to accommodate Debden Library, if Essex are willing to go in with Epping Forest, in premises in the Broadway, not necessarily the housing office, but there are plenty of underused shops within the Broadway which will be given a more worthy use. So I think this is on the right lines, and it needs extending as has been described.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. I'm sure you'll be banging on Councillor Barker's door about Debden Library in due course.
Already have, Chair.
I know you have. And with regards to your other points, of course, when I set about with this approach to getting everyone into one office and modernising the civic offices and making it more open to the public, there were certain parties in Epping Forest who said it was my vanity project, but actually it's working out quite well, isn't it? Not you, but certain parties in Epping said it was my vanity project, but actually a vanity project that's going to be good for the people of Epping and Epping Forest.
On your vanity, leader, I wouldn't use the phrase the civic to describe it, unless you want to go along the same lines as cost Sandwell Metropolitan Borough Council, a big loss of prestige and a rather big loss of money.
Yeah, well, we're not going to have a loss of money, and we're having no loss of prestige. Okay, let's go on to Councillor Patel's got his hand up again. Councillor Patel, you're silenced.
The amount of times where I said that's probably a good thing in the last week. But, sorry, just in response to what Councillor Ponners just said, I think initially when we were looking at the civic offices as the community hub for Epping High Street, this was at a time when the new developments were going to be located such that footfall could be essentially guided from one end of the high street to the other. But similarly with the Broadway, I mean, that ethos can maintain as well in terms of setting up a community hub at the other end of the Broadway to drive footfall from the landmark, for example, right through to the other end of the Broadway, where we have some, as we own the Broadway, it's much more easier for us to be able to facilitate something like that. So thank you very much, Councillor Pond, and it's something certainly that I'm quite keen to take forward.
Okay, that's good. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thank you. Yeah, my point was going to be that to be a community hub, it needed to be more than just somewhere where some organisations were under the same roof and paid rent to the same landlord. And I was pleased to hear from Ms Gould and Miss Wade that things do seem to be moving, in the direction of more, collaboration and sharing resources and so forth. And that's, an important part if it's not just, not just about premises. But that also means, things like we need to be careful if we're driving everyone to pre-booked appointments made digitally. That's going to be run against some of this collaboration and people who've got particular needs being able to address when they come up. Not everyone has access to be able to do that. Not everyone has life that allows them to plan their diaries in that way. So I think it's just a sort of plea really to make sure we're joining up the thinking about the physical stuff about who goes where and so forth with the practical stuff about how residents are dealt with and how residents are able to access services and so forth.
Very, very good points, because I think we're going to have to make sure the customer journey, and that's the customer that's at the heart of all of this, is correct. And of course, post-COVID, that will be very different, because some people will feel more confident online and other people will want to see people again. And I think, again, it comes back to some of Councillor Murray's points earlier on this evening. Some people will really require that personal contact and other people won't. But the most important thing, I want to make sure this is a success. And probably in the new year, I intend to get together, we'll have a member workshop or a group of members to have a look at this. Indeed, I may even set up a portfolio holder advisory group as we get ready to move back into the civic offices, just to make sure members are comfortable with how things are going. So that's certainly something that's on my mind for the new year. Okay, I've got no other members wishing to speak. I'm assuming that members are generally happy with the progress that's been made, and I can agree to recommendations that are in the report.
Great.
Great. Very much.
Agreed.
Okay. Item 16, Qualis Group Business Plan. Councillor Patel, your big moment.
Thank you, Leader. The business plan presented here is a one-year business plan for the Qualis Group. The shareholder agreement, as agreed by EFDC back in February, requires a 1 year and a 4 year business plan to be presented side by side each year. However, as the permanent Qualis board has only just been appointed, the board has asked for additional time to consider its plans for the next 4 years. Given the short time the new board has had to consider their medium-term strategy, this seems a reasonable request. Without the time to develop a medium-term strategy, the submitted business plan concentrates on delivering those activities that were contained within the original business case for Qualis. As a consequence, there are no significant new proposals contained within this plan that require the council's approval. Instead, the activities contained within it are only those that have previously been approved. Whilst the business case does consider some new activities that Qualis intends to explore during the forthcoming year, it does not seek authority to undertake these activities within the plan presented. Instead, if after consideration Qualis intends to progress any of these activities, then a formal request alongside a business case will need to be made to the shareholder. At that point, Cabinet and Council will have the opportunity to consider the request in detail and to make any comments or amendments that it wishes to add in line with its shareholder powers. The business plan projects small surplus in each of the years contained within the plan. These surpluses will depend upon activities being delivered in line with the plan's assumptions and in accordance with the timeframes envisaged. Given the volatile environment, much could change in the timeframe covered by this business plan, and so the council should be cautious in terms of how much gain it factors into its own medium-term financial plans. Once Qualis has had an opportunity to consider its longer-term direction and strategy, it is expected that it will present a fully developed 4 years business plan. In the meantime, if approved, the Qualis Group will concentrate on delivering those activities contained within this plan. These being those activities originally planned for Qualis when Council gave permission for the group to be created. Leader, I'm now going, as this is Qualis's business plan, I will now ask Sasha Jeevans, Qualis's Managing Director, to take us through the business plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patel. Sasha.
Hi, thank you. The business plan document is hopefully a helpful, clear information that sets out the structure and the purpose of each of the companies. It also has a second section which explains the governance framework, and that's the important area around how the council oversees the monitoring of Qualis and its activities. We have recently completed, as you know, the permanent recruitment of the full Qualis board. And so they are there to govern and oversee the activities of the group and the companies. The section on finance covers the income, the loans and funding arrangements for Qualis, the income and expenditure statements, the Qualis Living, which is the investment company, the balance sheet, and section 4.5 importantly sets out the financial assumptions that sit behind that information. Then the plan goes on to cover each subsidiary and the key priorities. And finally, there's a last section which talks about how we plan to manage risk across the group and its activities. So it sets out the framework and how we're going to manage that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, you've had an opportunity to see the business plan. It's a thorough document. I did have a number of questions emailed to me last night from Councillor Heap, which I know officers are preparing answers to in detail, so you'll have them before full council. So I'll start with Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman, and take on board the comments around Qualis's future returns to the council. We know from this business plan what they expect to give us in the next year. That is obviously something that Mr. Small and I are factoring into our consideration of the budget for next year. It is clear that COVID has had an effect on this, and there are decisions that we as a council will have to make in terms of how we take various things forward that will also have an effect on the budget. It is worth saying, though, that without having this in place, we'd be struggling significantly more in terms of the holes in our budget for next year and for the years after, which will certainly, at least initially, be difficult. So I welcome this and look forward to seeing at some point in the not too distant future the 4-year business plan that will allow us to factor that properly into our medium-term financial strategy.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Phillips. Any other members of the Cabinet? Not seeing any hands up. Okay, I'll therefore go to Councillor Stephen Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things. The first one is on the yellow on page 17, Qualis Living. When I read this was the first that I was aware of these completed acquisitions. Can I just first of all be told how it works? Do we, as the main shareholder, give a general instruction or right in the agreement that we have with Qualis to purchase and obviously set the amount that they're borrowing from us to purchase, but the actual purchases they make is down to Qualis? Because it was the first that I was aware that Qualis had an office in Leatherhead and non-food retail in Malden.
Okay.
That's my first point. So could we deal with that one first?
Yeah, Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Murray. Essentially, we have enabled Qualis to go out into the open market and purchase properties which they feel will generate an income stream for themselves and also for the council. It's not for us to determine what they purchase. They have an acquisition strategy which they work to, whose parameters they work within.
Okay. I mean, I might say that as the only shareholder, we might have a view of what they purchase, but if you're saying that the agreement doesn't allow us to have a view, that's kind of how the document read to me. Qualis telling us rather than we telling Qualis, but there we are. My other point...
Sorry, can I just come in there quickly? Yeah. Because I think it's important on this. Councillor Patel is quite right in his description of how this works, but of course Qualis have to go through a lot of due diligence before they purchase anything, and of course what they're looking at is yields to actually perform within the business plan that we are setting. So the important thing is, and I've looked at these projects, and the actual yields on them are very good, and they've gone through a very strict process in order to purchase them. So I think we need to be very clear about that. They're not just brought for the sake of buying them. They're investment purchases with good yields and positive returns, but I'm sure if any member wanted to take that up, we can always go into more detail at a different meeting.
I understand that point, Chairman. I've still got to go on to my second point. I do understand that point, but I'm just making it clear that these purchases have been made where they don't need the direct express approval of the district council, and that's how the mechanism works. And I'm saying as one councillor, I'm not particularly happy with that mechanism. I've got no comment on the purchases. I've got no basis on which to have a comment on paper. They look fine. My second question is definitely a question for the council, not for Qualis, and it's on the agenda item, page 220, paragraph 6, about Qualis management. It's very clear about needing cabinet approval as regards the transfer of future services and a full business case. I would like it to be much more explicit. Well, it doesn't say anything about the role of scrutiny, because I don't think the idea of being able to call in cabinet decisions is enough of a safeguard. I would like a scrutiny process, either through the main ONS committee or through the appropriate scrutiny panel, select committee rather we call them now, that the full business case is fully scrutinised before it comes to cabinet. I would be much happier with that process. And I think that's a reasonable view to take, because you're then having the scrutiny arm of the council look at the business case before a service is transferred, and then cabinet are looking at it as well. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I really cannot see a scenario where once a service is transferred, it's ever going to be transferred back to the council. So it's a really big step to transfer a service from a district council to Qualis, and I would like the safeguard of there being a full scrutiny process rather than just cabinet approval. I accept the point about a call-in, but I think that mechanism is too weak for something important as a transfer of a service that once transferred is never going to come back.
Councillor Murray, I know Councillor Patel will come back on this, but actually I think you make a good point this evening. I would like to look into it further. I won't give an off-the-cuff response to that, because normally the process would be that the business case would come to Cabinet, Cabinet would make a decision, and then, of course, the rights of call-in are there. But I understand what you're saying. But I will let Councillor Patel come back in a moment, but that's something I would like to take away from this evening, reflect upon, and perhaps feedback on by the time we get to full council, rather than giving off the cuff this evening. Councillor Patel.
That's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Leila, I completely agree with what you've said. I think it's a sensible approach. At the end of the day, this is a council decision, and it's important that all members are engaged in that process. So any transfer of service should be quite rightly discussed amongst all councillors and decision made, so that when we do take a motion back to full council to transfer a service, we can agree in unison.
Yep. Okay. So we'll take that back. Councillor Patel, what I would suggest you do is discuss with officers before this comes to full council in December, so that you can perhaps we can give some answers then. You might not have all the answers, but it'd be worth being able to report some of it back by then. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to say too much, because I've got to be cautious in what I say in case I fetter my discretion. But what's brought to my attention is on page 219, items 4.1 and 4.2, and in particular in 4.1, the last item there, which is Pearls Lane, which refers to a residential development of 80 dwellings. Well, this obviously refers to the Pearls Lane nursery site, which has previously had planning permission, which has now lapsed for 36 dwellings. Now, that site is backed onto by quite a few residents in my ward, or a number of houses that back onto that site. And obviously it's quite sensitive to those residents. And I've mentioned this before, that I hope that Qualis would have engendered good relationships with the residents in there, because it is sensitive. So obviously I've got concerns when I see 80 dwellings as opposed to 36. And the 36 was actually an increase from the previous planning application, which was for 32. So that I sort of mark up my concerns now, because I think if any residents do read this agenda and are aware of that, then they're going to have quite a lot of concern and pressure that will be felt on them while all this is sort of in abeyance until we finally sort out what's going to be done on that site. So I'm asking for consideration for my residents whose homes back onto that site to be given, because they've been residents, many of them for a long time, in Epping Forest District area, and also long-term taxpayers as well, council taxpayers. So I'm asking for that consideration to be given to them.
Thanks, Councillor Wixley. Obviously, I won't comment on a planning application, but what I will say is I'm sure Qualis will give due regard to local ward members and the residents in particular, more than even ward members, when they're putting forward a planning application. I won't comment on what planning application will come forward because I don't know, but I know how sharp the teeth are of Plan South, and I'm sure you will be the guardian of your residents as it progresses. Councillor Patel, would you like to add anything?
Just to reiterate what you said, obviously we've got to follow the planning process and planning approval was lapsed, so a fresh application will be necessary. So it's in the interest of Qualis Council to work with ward members to try and get through a mutually beneficial scheme which supports local regeneration and local residents, as well as supporting the council in bringing income stream revenue.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Pond.
Could the portfolio holder tell me if he's made any estimate of the effect on the business plan of the statement made last week by the Chancellor of the Exchequer on the question of the misapplication of Public Works Loan Board loans merely or mainly for the purpose of assuring yield?
Councillor Patel.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bond. Obviously, this is very early stages from when the government announcement was made. However, I have had a meeting with their senior estates officer and Mr. Small today, where we have been looking at how potentially the council can bring in more income from its existing asset base, and we will certainly be exploring that as we look to move forward and see how we can generate finance.
Yeah, just to add to that, Councillor Patel, obviously what Councillor Pond is talking about is the Public Works Loan Board financing, and of course we're still waiting at this time for some more detail from government as to how that will actually take full effect. So I'm sure by the time we get to full council, Councillor Pond will be able to give you more detail.
Chairman, just for information, Mr. Small and I have already discussed that, and what you've said summarises our discussion very accurately. We haven't enough information yet to know exactly what it means, but we need to make sure that we remain compliant with it. But as was already pointed out, Qualis does have the ability to raise money from sources outside the council.
There you go. Well done. Superb. Okay, Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful to Councillor Pond for asking one of the questions I was going to ask. I just wanted to mention the importance of getting the longer term business plan sooner rather than later. And clearly, Qualis is spending money rapidly and carrying out a lot of work and investing a lot of resources. And these will have implications. I mean, even well beyond the 5-year business plan period. And I do think we need to know a bit more about the medium-term plans and spending and so forth. And I do disagree with what Councillor Patel said, that members don't really have an interest in the acquisition strategy. I mean, at the end of the day, the purchases Qualis make, put our residents' capital at risk because it's our residents' capital we're transferring to Qualis to invest. So, I do think it's important that we do have a clear understanding of what that strategy is. And it certainly came as a surprise to me that we were starting to invest well outside the district, because I remember the discussions at Finance and Performance Management Cabinet Subcommittee when members very much poured cold water on that particular sort of approach. And I think if there was this sort of vault pass, it should have been more evident in the discussions that happened before the money was transferred to Qualis. And finally, I was pleased to see there's a bit more clarity now that the District Council is likely to buy back the new sports centre from Qualis and then presumably enter into a management agreement. So I welcome that clarity. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Good points again. Thank you for making them. With regards to, that's why I brought up the issue of due diligences around the investment purchases. With regards to the business plans, ideally, I would like to have seen this business plan go to a select panel first of all, because I think that's the correct route. And I think when we get to the 4-year business plan, I would like to see it go to a select panel before it comes to Cabinet, which will give an opportunity for comment by the scrutiny side. The reason this business plan has come in this way is because it's coming to here, then on to council, which would be where members have a second chance to give their thoughts on it. But of course, there's items in here that will be reflected in our budget making process, and therefore budget's going to have to move quite quickly now in a post-COVID world, and that hence one of the reasons why it's taken this route this evening. But I would have hoped when we get to the next business plan, it will go for a select panel first. That's just a route I would prefer, because then I always like to hear the thoughts of scrutiny prior to it getting to this level. But thank you for your comments. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I did ask a lot of questions via email, and I would really appreciate if they could all be circulated to any member who is interested, particularly the group leaders. I would like to ask one question, which is about page 17 of the supplementary thing. How did this deal come about? As in, who was looking in Leatherhead or wherever it was, Malden? Are you employing? Is Qualis employing somebody to look for these deals? How are they being paid? Is it commission based? If it was commission based, how much commission was paid on this deal? We're borrowing residents' money, or we're borrowing against residents' goodwill, because the residents have always been good at paying their council tax, and it's a very, very well-run borough, etc., or district, etc. We didn't actually agree when Qualis was set up. I mean, it was always a bit of a rush thing. We didn't actually agree, and I did ask the question, we shouldn't do this in speculative things outside of the district. And this is exactly what we've done. This money should be invested in the district. That's my big problem with this one.
I would disagree with you there, because at the end of the day, I do think we need to be in a position where we're getting a good return for our investments, and not all investments in the district would give us a good return. There is an argument that investments locally could help to protect jobs locally and investment in the local economy, which I have no objection to. However, these investments are all good investments, carefully gone through in due diligence. I will ask Sasha Jevons just to make a comment as from a Qualis point of view, to give you the idea of how things will progress.
Yeah, sure. And just for context as well, the council agreed an asset management strategy back in February, I think last year, about the approach to investments outside the district. And indeed, it formed part of the discussion in the setup documents of Qualis and the cabinet reports. So in terms of how we decide on investments, there is a risk and investment committee. It's a membership of 3 members of the group board. They look in great detail at each opportunity as it comes forward. So each one is fully appraised against a set of strict financial parameters, assumptions. And we engage with commercial estate agents, and yes, they're on a fixed fee basis upon successful completion of a purchase. So there are a number of layers through which each opportunity is appraised. When the Risk and Investment Committee has appraised that and it meets the financial criteria, then it goes forward to the group board for final sign-off before putting in a bid for a property and completing on the purchase. So quite a detailed process. We've got a risk and investment strategy that sets that out. And as I said, we've got a committee dedicated to that.
Thank you.
May I come back briefly in a minute?
Very briefly, because it's been a long evening.
Sorry, so what was the actual total of the commission paid on those purchases?
I'm just going to bring Nick in here, please, who did the modelling.
Is it not commercially sensitive?
Why is it commercially sensitive? We're all in the council. We're all the shareholder.
Chairman, I do believe
We're still being webcast at this stage.
yeah, I believe it's commercially sensitive.
Okay.
Can we hear that after the event then? Can we hear that when it, whatever the agenda item is?
What I would suggest is that a written answer is given to that question after this meeting, so we can actually, and then if necessary, Councillor Heat, we can work out whether or not it should be given in council as well, because you may wish to take it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Everyone's had an opportunity to have their say on the business plan. Can we agree the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Very much. Okay. Members, we're now moving into any other business. There's no any other business. Then we're going on to item 18, which is the exclusion of public and press, which is necessary this evening. To consider whether under section 100 in brackets A in brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press should be excluded from the meeting for the items of business set out below, on grounds that they will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the following paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as amended, or are confidential under section 100 in brackets A in brackets 2. This is for, can I take that as agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
So this is for agenda